The Donkey and the Deep Well. There was once an old donkey that lived with a farmer in a small, quiet village. The donkey had helped the farmer for many years. He carried heavy baskets of crops, pulled things around the farm, and worked hard in the fields. The farmer trusted him and cared for him because the donkey was always loyal. But as time passed, the donkey grew older. His legs were not as strong, his back was tired, and he could not work as quickly as before. Still, he tried his best every day, even though his body was no longer the same. One unlucky day, while the donkey was walking near the farm, something bad happened. He slipped and fell into a deep, dark well in the ground. The sides of the well were too steep, so he could not climb out. The bottom was cold, wet, and scary. The donkey was very frightened, and he began to cry loudly for help. His braying echoed up through the well and across the village. He hoped someone would hear him and come to save him, because he did not want to stay trapped in the dark hole. For many hours, the poor donkey cried out from inside the dark well. His loud, sad braying could be heard all across the farm. He hoped with all his heart that his master would hear him and come to help. Finally, the farmer did arrive, worried by the desperate sounds. He walked over to the well and looked down. When he saw his donkey trapped so far below, his heart grew heavy with sadness. The well was very deep, the walls were steep, and the donkey was already old and weak. The farmer thought about how hard it would be to pull the animal up. He knew it would take many people, strong ropes, and a lot of effort. But even then, the donkey might not survive. The farmer stood quietly, thinking for a long time. He remembered how the donkey had worked hard for many years, but he also knew the animal was too old to keep working like before. A painful thought entered his mind. Even if I try, I will never be able to bring him out safely, he whispered to himself with sorrow. Slowly, he convinced himself there was only one choice left. He told himself, "This well is no longer useful, and my donkey has reached the end of his life. It will be better to fill this well with soil and bury them both together." Though it was a very harsh and difficult decision, the farmer tried to believe it was the most practical and reasonable thing to do. The farmer quickly called his neighbors to come and help. Soon, several men arrived at the farm, each one carrying a shovel in his hand. They stood around the well and listened to the donkey's cries, but no one thought he could be saved. Without waiting, they began to shovel dirt into the well. One by one, piles of soil fell from above, landing on the donkey's back. At first, the donkey was confused. He did not know why they were throwing dirt on him, but after a few moments, he understood the terrible truth. They were not helping him. They were trying to bury him alive inside the dark well. The donkey's heart filled with panic. Fear rushed through him, and he brayed louder than ever before, his cries echoing far and wide. Each time the heavy dirt landed on his back, it hurt and pressed him down. Soon, his legs began to sink into the growing pile beneath him, and he felt trapped more than before. It seemed like the whole world had turned against him, and his hope started to fade away. His spirit nearly broke, and for a moment, the donkey thought there was no way to escape. But in the middle of all his fear and sadness, the donkey suddenly had an idea. He stopped crying for a moment and began to think hard. Maybe I should not fight the dirt, he thought to himself. So, instead of struggling every time soil fell on his back, he shook his body strongly and the dirt slipped down to the ground. Then he carefully stepped up onto the new layer of soil. When more dirt came, he did the same thing again. Shake it off, then step up. Little by little, the donkey began to rise higher inside the well. Each time the farmers threw down more dirt, he used it to climb instead of letting it bury him. His body was weak and tired, and his heart still beat fast with fear, but he refused to give up. He kept repeating his new plan again and again. What was meant to trap him was now becoming the very thing that helped him escape. The dirt that could have been his end was slowly turning into his ladder of hope. Above the well, the farmer and his neighbors kept shoveling dirt, certain that the donkey would soon be buried. They no longer heard his loud cries and thought he had given up. But after a while, something unusual caught their attention. The sound of braying had stopped, yet there was a new noise coming from the well, the steady sound of hooves scraping and climbing. The men looked at one another with confusion. What could that sound be? Curious, they leaned over the edge of the well, and what they saw made their mouths fall open in shock. The donkey was still alive, and not only alive, he was climbing. Step by step, he was standing taller each time more dirt fell on him. With every shovelful of soil, the donkey shook it off and used it to rise higher. What the men thought would be the end of the poor animal was turning into his chance to escape. Their eyes grew wide with amazement, and though they were astonished, their hands kept moving, shoveling dirt that now helped the donkey come closer to freedom. Finally, after a long struggle, the well was almost filled with soil. Slowly, the donkey's head rose above the edge, surprising everyone who was watching. With one last strong effort, he pushed with his legs and leapt out of the well. At last, he stood safely on solid ground again. His body was covered with dust and dirt, but his eyes were bright and full of life. The donkey had made it out, even when no one believed he could. The farmer and his neighbors stood silently, unable to believe what they had just seen. A moment ago, they were sure the donkey would die, yet now he stood tall in front of them. What they thought would bury him had actually saved him. The donkey had turned a terrible situation into a victory. His story showed that even when life feels dark and hopeless, courage and determination can turn problems into a way out, even changing a grave into a path to freedom.